I have lots of questions about the Columbus Blue Jackets defense core. Let's talk about them on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the app now by visiting FanDuel.com and you can win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I want to talk about it in some more detail, especially with some of the news coming out today. I have many questions about what the defense for the Blue Jackets is going to look like this upcoming season and in future seasons, quite frankly. So we're going to talk a little bit about the defense kind of as it looks right now, the questions I have for that. Daemon Hunt looks like he might have made the team, which is confusing to me, frankly, and also gives me more questions about some of the moves that were made this offseason. And also, Christian Yaris was put on unconditional waivers, which I don't think is any real loss to the team, but I do want to talk about it a little bit. So let's start off with the decor as it is currently constructed. So the Blue Jackets have 8 defensemen right now in camp. Obviously, they can still make some moves. They can call guys up, they can send them down, but I don't know if they will. It looks like they're rolling with 8 defensemen again, which I find, which is my first confusion, right? Because I don't think it worked last year, and I think the 2 defensemen that are going to be sitting in the press box are defensemen that could be better served playing. Now, I understand that waivers exist, and that's a problem, etc., and we'll get into that in a second here. But it looks to me like the top 6 defensemen on this team is Zach Werenski, Dante Fabro, Ivan Provorov, Damon Severson, Denton Matejchuk, Eric Gudbranson. There's your top 6, it seems like. And then they currently have Jake Christiansen and Daemon Hunt as extras as 7 and 8 defensemen. I am not unopposed to this being the top 8, frankly. I do think I would move some things around. And again, I'm not going to get too in the weeds about it because I did talk about it a fair amount yesterday. But it looks like Dean is really trying to make the Provorov-Severson pairing happen again. And I don't think it's a great idea. I think they're not particularly compatible. And I think it's a disservice to the development of Denton Matejchuk to put him on the third pairing with Eric Gudbranson. Now, I do think that a Severson-Gudbranson pairing would also be a disaster, but that's another conversation. Because again, I maintain that Jake Christiansen should be in the top 6 of this team. I think he is a very underrated bottom 4 defenseman. I think he has a lot of upside relative to where he plays. I'm not saying that he's got a ton of first pairing upside, but I think he is a very underrated defenseman with potential that we haven't seen yet. He was a big scorer in juniors, hasn't really unlocked that at the NHL level, but he's a good young puck-moving defenseman, right? Again, I really like that pairing with him and Severson last year. To me, of the defensemen that you have right now, that's what I would do for the third pairing. I would have Matejchuk back up on the second pairing with Provorov, and then I'd have Christiansen and Severson as your third pairing, and then have Eric Gudbranson hanging around for injuries and also just kind of for the vibes, because I feel like he's a really good guy to have around for the vibes. I don't know that he needs to be in the lineup every single night, but I understand his value to the team, as an adult and as a veteran and as someone in the locker room, But to me, it sounds like Christiansen's going to be sitting in the press box, and it also sounds like Daemon Hunt is going to be sitting in the press box, which is 2 very confusing options. Admittedly, I didn't see a ton from Hunt that made me think, yes, he absolutely is NHL ready right now. But I also don't know that he's a guy that you want to put in the press box, right? Surely if the organization is as high on him as they sound like they are, and I'll talk about what Chris Clark said in Tuesday's game in a second here. If you're as high on him as you are as a good young defenseman, then surely you want him playing and not sitting in the press box, right? This was what went wrong with Jiricek. There were several things that went wrong with Jiricek, right? But from a team organizational standpoint, he was called up, he was sent down, he was in the press box, he was called up, he was sent down, he was in the press box. Like, he didn't play a ton in his last full year in Columbus because he was constantly going back and forth. And when he was with the Blue Jackets, he was either in the press box or he was playing 6 to 8 minutes a night, right? And that's, if you're high on a defenseman like that, then I don't see the value in sitting him or sheltering his minutes that much, right? Either put him in the AHL and play him there, or put him in the lineup and play him a real amount of time, right? And I kind of feel similarly to Daemon Hunt, which is, again, I don't know that I saw a ton from him in preseason that made me think, yeah, he's a top 6 defenseman for this team, but I do think that he has value to the organization, and it sounds like the organization values him pretty highly, which, again, does create another question that I'll talk about in a second here. But they talked about him during the game on Tuesday. They had Chris Clark, I believe he's technically the assistant GM of the Blue Jackets, but also the GM of the Monsters, I believe is his official job title. And they were like, yeah, no, we're huge fans of Hunt. We think he was great in the AHL last season. We really wanted to see him at the end of last season, but obviously the Blue Jackets were in that playoff push, and they didn't want to, call him up and insert him into the lineup while the team was pushing for a playoff spot, messing with the chemistry, et cetera, right? Which, again, makes a ton of sense. Is kind of the first I've been hearing of that. Again, I thought that Daemon Hunt was fine, was not flashy. And again, that's kind of his style, right? Is he's not flashy. He was fine with the Monsters. I think he was probably better than he looked, because he seems to be one of those guys that is, you only notice him when things go wrong, right? And I don't notice him a ton. So, clearly he's doing all the right things, but clearly the organization's really high on him. So I understand from that point of view that, like, yeah, we want him up with the NHL. But again, I keep coming back to, where is he the most valuable to the organization? Because it cannot possibly be in the press box. But for him to be in the NHL lineup, then one of, or potentially both, of Severson and Gabranson are going to have to not be in the lineup. And I don't think they're going to do that either. Obviously, lots of things can change. Blue Jackets were off yesterday, are back on the ice today, so maybe we'll see some change-ups, some move-arounds. Hopefully, we'll see Matejchuk back on that second pairing. So I really do think that's the best place for him. But I don't see a path forward necessarily for Hunt to get significant NHL time this season, in which case, surely he is much, much better off being in the AHL. It's similar to Luca Del Barbaloos, right? Who I know was really upset to be sent down. He thought that he'd done enough to make the team, and frankly, he probably had done enough to make the team, right? But again, I would much rather have him playing 1C minutes in the AHL than sitting in the press box as the 13th or 14th forward for the Blue Jackets, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with Hunt. But I wanted to talk about another thing that I was kind of mulling over last night / earlier today with Daemon Hunt, which is, if the organization is so high on someone like Daemon Hunt, why have they kind of built the team in a way that is going to block players like Hunt from making significant contributions to the NHL for at least the next few years going forward, right? So I wanted to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It gives you a bunch of different ways to play. You can build parlays, you can do player props, you can even jump in mid-game if you think that there's going to be like an insane comeback that happens, then you can put some money on that as well. You're not locked out by puck drop, which is great. Makes watching sports even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked a little bit about the makeup of the defense core as it stands and why it doesn't make a ton of sense to me as currently constructed. We talked a little bit about Daemon Hunt, and I want to talk a little bit more about Daemon Hunt, but more in the concept of like, I still, and maybe I'm a broken record here, and I probably will continue to be a broken record here. I don't understand the contract situation, or I do understand the contract situation for the Blue Jackets on the blue line at the minute. I just don't think it makes sense, right? Obviously, Werenski is a key piece. You're paying him for the next 3 years after this. You're paying Ivan Provorov $8.5 million until 2032. You're paying Damon Severson $6.25 million until 2031. Like, again, Fabro deal, I don't really have a problem with it. Erica Branson's money comes off the books at the end of this season, but next summer or 2 summers' time, Jake Christiansen's going to need a new contract. Daemon Hunt is going to be coming off his ELC. And into this mix, you want to add someone like Daemon Hunt, which, again, I'm fine with on the surface. But also, in theory, you've got, guys like Jackson Smith are going to be ready to take that step forward. And if the team is as high on Daemon Hunt as they seem to be and as they are saying that they are, I still don't know how much sense it made to re-sign Provorov. And I do think that that is going to be the backbreaker, right? Like, I think in a couple of years, potentially, you could move the Severson contract. In a couple of years, potentially that contract doesn't look as bad as it is right now, especially with the cap rising. Provorov contract to me feels like it's going to be the backbreaker. Again, in 3 seasons, Zach Werenski's going to need probably quite a lot of money. He is going to be 31 by the end of this contract, so maybe like not a stupid amount of money, but again, we'll see where the cap situation goes, etc. But he's probably going to be getting a pay raise, right? You want to fit Daemon Hunt in here, you want to fit Daemon Hunt in here, you want to fit Jackson Smith in here, like, and it feels like in a couple of years' time, so like the 27-28 season start, it's going to be really, really difficult because you've still got 4 defensemen under contract in Werenski, Provorov, Severson, Fabro. And then you want to bring in, Daemon Hunt needs a new contract. Jake Christiansen needs a new contract. You potentially want to bring in someone like a Jackson Smith, maybe someone like a Stanislav Svozil, who I'm still very high on. And it feels a little bit like they've painted themselves into a corner with defense. And if they were as high on Hunt as they claim to be, I don't know. I understand that development is not linear, and I understand why the Provorov contract was signed. I don't like it, but I understand Don Waddell's logic behind it, right? I still don't think it was a good idea. I still think that it would have been better to take a small step back with the defense this season, to take a bigger step forward the season after that. But I think ownership is pressing hard for the playoffs. I think because they overachieved this year, they all talked about it at media day, like anything less than playoffs is a failure, right? So I do think that kind of bought into it. Obviously, Provorov held all the leverage, but I do wonder if knowing what they know now, having seen Jake Christiansen excel at this training camp, having seen that they like what they have in Daemon Hunt, I do wonder if 2 months ago, that contract with Provorov doesn't get signed because they decide to go with a slightly younger, more inexperienced defense core to build further down the line. But maybe that's just me. Again, I know that I am a broken record about this. I know that every day is hear this every other episode, but I keep looking for ways that the Provorov contract is going to make sense in like 2 seasons or 3 seasons, and I really can't see it. Maybe they make the playoffs with him this year. Maybe he continues to improve as a defenseman. Again, I liked him this season. Hopefully that continues. Hopefully it wasn't just it's a contract year, I've got my money and now I'm going to regress to the player that I was, 2 years ago. But we'll see how that goes. We'll see how it falls out. I'm not convinced. I am willing to be convinced, but the proof is going to be in the play, right? And again, carrying 8 defensemen doesn't make a ton of sense to me, especially if the guys they're going to be sitting in the press box are your young guys that you could, have playing somewhere else. That being said, just to go back to Hunt for a minute, I understand that they are leery of putting him on waivers because he, I think I said in Tuesday's episode or yesterday's episode that he didn't have to go through waivers. Turns out he does have to go through waivers, which is very annoying. But there's going to be a ton of guys on waivers over the next couple of days. And honestly, GMs are cowards. I think there's only been 1 or 2 players that have been claimed off waivers since the beginning of training camp. And one of those is Tyson Jost. So, like, again, I don't think there's a ton of worry in players getting claimed on waivers. Again, it happens so rarely. Like, I think that you'd be safe. Although the chance for that might have passed, right? It might have been let's sneak him through earlier in the training camp process. I don't know. I understand that they don't want to put him on waivers in case they lose him for nothing, but I also don't know that the best place for him is the press box right now. In fact, I'm almost certain it's not the best place for him. And frankly, the Monsters could use another experienced top pairing defenseman. Because, again, I keep looking at the Monsters roster, and they really could use a blue liner or 2 or several. That being said, there is other news that came out yesterday in terms of defensemen, which is Christian Jaros has been placed on unconditional waivers for the purpose of mutual contract termination, I believe is the official phrasing. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to talk about Christian Jaros for a bit. We've talked quite a lot about Daemon Hunt. Christian Jaros is still on the roster officially, but I believe hasn't been with the team for about a week or so. His wife gave birth, so he flew home to be with her, has yet to return. And frankly, I suspect that what happened was a conversation of, listen, we don't have room for you in the NHL. Do you want to go to the AHL? Like, do you want to go on waivers? Or do you want to go back to Europe? He was playing in the KHL last year, I believe. I don't remember what team exactly. Let me pull that up real quick. He was playing for CSKA Moscow. Hasn't been in the NHL since the 21-22 season. I was not expecting much from Jaros. I didn't see a ton of him in the preseason, but what I did see was very much like, yeah, this is a dude, you know? He wasn't a top 6 defenseman. Frankly, he wasn't a top 8 defenseman, right? Like, this to me felt like a guy that you're going to put on waivers, and if you absolutely have to call him up, he probably won't be a liability if you play him for, extremely limited and sheltered minutes, right? But I think my guess is that that's what happened, right? Is that they've said, listen, you're not going to make the team. Do you want to go back to Europe, or do you want to go to the AHL? And he, I assume, went, I can make more money in the KHL. I would like to go there. His contract, which I had open and then closed because this is Locked On Blue Jackets, and we all know what happens when Locked On Blue Jackets has a tab open. It disappears into the ether. He was on I believe a 2-way contract. Was going to be making $775K in the NHL and $300K in the minors. So if he thinks he can get more than $300K over in Europe, then that's my guess that happens. I don't think this is a huge loss for the Blue Jackets. I was a little bit surprised by it, but I also, he didn't really impress me all that much in training camp, in preseason. I didn't see a ton from him, and what I did see, I was like, yeah, you could replace this dude with several other guys, right? For a comparable, I thought Dyson Mayo was, again, just kind of a guy, but I did think that there was some upside there of, again, you could probably put him in the NHL on the third pairing and he wouldn't be a complete liability, unlike, some players. It's no great loss. Does ease the logjam a little bit, but again, going back to what I said about Hunt, right, of what the Monsters could use, is that the Monsters probably could have used another veteran defenseman that knows how the game works and is probably good to play, 18 to 22 minutes a night and not be a complete disaster. So kind of a loss for the Monsters, not really any great loss for the Blue Jackets. I'm sure he will go back to the KHL and do very well there. I'm just pulling up what his points were. He had 12 points in 51 KHL games last season, which is not nothing, right? For a defenseman as well. But yeah, I don't think There was never anything there. I know that when they signed him, they said, "Oh yeah, we think he's a good defenseman that can play in the NHL or the AHL and contribute to the team and compete hard and blah blah blah." This didn't feel like a needle moving move, and it turns out it wasn't. So that's, I guess, one less defenseman to worry about. I don't know off the top of my head what the Blue Jackets roster is sitting at right now. I believe they are at 25 players, but included in that 25 players is Ivan Fedotov, who is going to be going down to the minors. He cleared waivers. They've kept him up with the team, but they don't actually have to send him down. I believe, I don't remember what the exact numbers are. I believe it's either 10 games or 30 days after clearing waivers. If he's still with the NHL then, he has to go through waivers again. But my guess is probably some point in the next few days, he's going to go down to the Monsters and join training camp there, which started up on Monday, I think. So good for him to get some reps in down there. But so I believe the 25-man roster is including Ivan Fedotov. And beyond that, I believe they have 13 forwards and 8 defensemen. So maybe they only have 24. Okay, you know what it is? The 25 was including Yaros and Fedotov. So with Yaros out of the way, Fedotov down, that's their 23-man roster. 13 forwards, 8 defensemen, 2 goalies. Seems like the opening night roster is set, unless they do decide that they want to try and sneak Hunt through the waivers. And I personally would rather them carry a 14th forward than an 8th defenseman. But that's just me. And again, I don't really have a horse in that race. Just like, I feel like forwards, you change them up more often. I feel like you should change your defense up less often. Obviously, the Blue Jackets did it quite a lot last season, but with injuries and inconsistencies and whatnot, I would like to see more consistency and more health from the defensemen this season. But who knows? That's kind of what I've got for today. Tomorrow, I think we'll probably have some more news to talk about. It sounds like there's going to be some movement with the Blue Jackets, whether that's calling guys up, sending them down. Obviously, we'll know if Yaros clears waivers. Not that that's a real, again, needle mover of a transaction, but there'll be something to talk about in terms of preseason training camp, etc. Maybe I'll just get mad about the defense pairings again for 24 minutes. Who can say? Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter. If you've got comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.